So this lesson, for some of you, may be difficult and reassuring at the same time. The name of this lesson is Jesus, Fluffy or Ferocious. A lot of people in the faith, or a lot of people who believe they're in the faith, get a perception of Jesus, and tonight we're going to find out if that's an accurate one. Now, when I was in the Sunday church, I thought that Jesus loved me for who I was, no matter who I was. He loved me for what I did, and if I slipped up, I could just at any time I wanted, ask for forgiveness, and He would accept me. And if I was, if I didn't do things according to the book, if I didn't keep His royal commandments, if I didn't keep His dietary law, He loved me. So, He knew my heart. That's what I believed then. And I know a lot of brothers and sisters still believe that. And so tonight we're going to check against the book to see if that's accurate. The most important thing is, check that. Let me say it this way. A lot of people in our walk, in our faith, when we come into this truth, they say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and the beginning of knowledge. And that's certainly true. But we cannot forget the weightier matters of the law. We cannot forget those things that are important. So I'm actually going to sidetrack myself real quick. I just want to read something. This is from 1 Corinthians 13. And this is a reminder to me of what's important. So give me a second. I apologize to derail my own lesson before I started, but I just want to read something. Because I want to keep this in context, because I need to keep this in context. Because the lesson I'm going to give tonight, for a traditional Sunday Christian, this will be a difficult lesson. Because they might come into some truths that they haven't heard before. They certainly won't hear it Sunday morning when they go to their church. But it is what thus saith the Lord, so we have to deal with that. But we also, we can't lose sight of what we're trying to do. We're trying to wake up our brothers and sisters in the faith. We're trying to bring our brothers and sisters who have never heard the word into the faith. And so I want to read this, derail myself, so indulge me. There's no greater lesson or context other than what I'm going to read. It's a pretty complete segment. This is 1 Corinthians 13, and we're going to read 1 through 13. We're going to read the entire chapter. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And what St. Paul is telling us there, that if I don't have charity or love in my heart, and I speak with the tongue of men or angels, I'm just going to sound like clanging metal. It's going to be nonsensical. It's going to be an affront to the ears. Verse 2, and though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. So that's a difficult verse for me, because here you have, he's saying, if I have the gift of prophecy, if I understand all the, if I have faith to move, enough to move mountains, but I don't have love in my heart, I'm nothing. Verse 3, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil. Rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. Beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth, but whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, and we can only know in part today, in this flesh. We can only prophesy in part in this flesh. But when that which is perfect is come, when Jesus is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three. But the greatest of these is charity. I just wanted to derail myself with that. I kind of had that. I actually shared that with somebody today. And I just wanted to bring that to mind. So let's get started on this lesson. Sorry to derail myself. We're going to talk about Jesus. And the question is he fluffy or is he ferocious? And of course that is somewhat of a comical title, but it's meant to kind of evoke a little bit of thought. What do you mean fluffy or ferocious? Well, the fact is they make this Jesus, someone has made this Jesus a very fluffy guy. He's this Malibu surfer dude. You know, Lord said, make no image, make no similitude, but yet we've got this surfer guy who takes all comers no matter how you are. You know, just come as you are, no matter what. He loves you. Oh, you murdered someone, it's okay. He loves you. Oh, you're an adulterer, it's okay. You're a sodomite, no problem. Just come, just profess the Lord. And we want to see if that's true because, you know, if we have charity for people, then we should tell them the truth, right? I mean, if you see your friend walking off the cliff, I mean, if he's your friend, you'll say, hey, hold, man, don't jump up, you're about to die. So by the same token, if I see somebody that's worshiping a false god, and I know that in the end they're going to end up in the lake of fire, if I'm their friend, I'm not going to be like, oh, he'll think I'm strange if I tell him what saith the Lord. Oh, he'll think I'm judgmental if I tell him. Oh, he'll think I'm one of them holy rollers. Well, do you love your friend or not? Because if you do, you need to say something. And if you call yourself a person of faith and in the truth of what thus saith the Lord, then you need to tell them what thus saith the Lord. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So we're going to see if Jesus is actually fluffy, if he's taking all comers no matter who they are, what they do, what their lifestyle is, if they wear rainbows on their clothes, or if he's ferocious at times. And by the end of this lesson, if you happen to be new to the faith, if you're not sure, if you just happen to come across Facebook and you're like, what is that knucklehead talking about? Why is he live? What does it say on that board? Stick around and you'll be able to answer the question by the end of this lesson. So we're going to start this in Joshua. We're going to start this in the 24th chapter of Joshua. Now the Bible tells us that the proper way to read the Bible is here a little, there a little, precept upon precept, line upon line. So we're going to jump around the Bible, and you're going to find out that by even though we're going to jump from book to book and chapter to chapter and different verses, you're going to find that it's going to weave a story for you, and it's going to weave a truthful story for you, and it's going to give you understanding in God's Word. So for the longest time, I didn't know how to read the book. I read it from the front to the back, and I thought I knew something. And then a brother at work started telling me the real truth. He started teaching me really how you're supposed to use a book, and it opened up my understanding. But the reason that happened was because the Lord chose for me to have this understanding. So I pray that he chooses that you too get this understanding tonight. We're going to start at Joshua 24. We're going to go verses 1 through 4. And Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and for their judges and for their officers, and they presented themselves before God. See, Israel is God's people. And back then, in the time of Joshua, the Lord was leading the nation. So Joshua is bringing the people before the Lord. He's presenting them unto the Lord. Verse 2, And Joshua said unto all the people, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Your fathers dwelt on the other side of the flood in old time, even Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nachor, and they served other gods. He's calling back to an earlier time. He talks about the time for the flood. That was the flood of Noah. Then he talks about Abraham's father, and he calls to mind the fact that Abraham's father worshipped other gods. In fact, I think they had 360 other individual gods, basically one for every day of the year. They had a different god, and did until the time of Islam in the Middle East, or what's known as the Middle East, in Near East. But he's saying, you know, even Abraham, his father, believed in other gods. Verse 3, And I took your father Abraham from the other side of the flood, and led him throughout all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his seed, and gave him Isaac. And I gave unto Isaac Jacob and Esau, and I gave unto Esau Mount Seir, to possess it. But Jacob and his children went down into Egypt. And that's absolutely true. In fact, Joseph, Jacob's son, was the first to go. His own brother sold him, and he got down there as a slave, and he ended up becoming the second ruler in Egypt. And that was through drought and through his ability to interpret dreams for Pharaoh, but that's another lesson. So let's drop down to verse 6. And I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and ye came unto the sea, and the Egyptians pursued after your fathers with chariots and horsemen into the Red Sea. And 7. And when they cried unto the Lord, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and brought the sea upon them, and covered them. And your eyes have seen what I have done in Egypt, and ye dwelt in the wilderness a long season. So in case you haven't figured this out yet, we're talking about the birth of the nation of Israel here. You know, the fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob had 12 sons, and they became the 12 progenitors of the 12 tribes of Israel, but they went into Egypt. They were there for 430 years, and then the Lord sent Moses to bring them out, and that's when the nation of Israel was born in the wilderness, when they came out of Egypt. And Joshua's brought the people before God, and he's reminding them of this journey and of how they came to be at that place today. Let's drop down to verse 11. And you went over Jordan, and now they're going into the land, and came unto Jericho, and the men of Jericho fought against you, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Girgashites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I delivered them into your hand. Drop down to verse 13. And I have given you a land for which ye did not labor, and cities which ye built not, and ye dwell in them. Of the vineyards and olive yards which ye planted not, do ye eat. And brothers and sisters, I'm not all wise, but I really do believe the fact that Israel was given the land of Canaan, that they didn't build, means something. I really believe that there's something to that. And when I figure it out, I'll come back and tell you. Verse 14, now therefore fear the Lord, and serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood, and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. So he's telling them, you know what, you used to be another people, and you used to serve other gods, but now I called your forefathers, now I've called you the nation, and now I'm telling you on this day to serve the Lord. He's saying, put away your old gods. That time is over, now it's time to serve the Lord. 15. And if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites, in whose lands ye dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible. Joshua telling the nation of Israel that he's saying, you choose what you're going to do. You're going to do no matter. And I say this to people in one way or another all the time when I meet them, even people very close to me. Hey man, you can tell me your stories, and you can tell me all the things that made you the person you are, and made you make the decisions you've made. And you can tell me how your God is this and your God does that, but I read this book, and I know what thus saith the Lord. And on this day, me and this house are going to serve the Lord. And I tell that to people great and people small. This day I am going to serve the Lord. Let's drop down to verse 19. And Joshua said unto the people, you cannot serve the Lord, for he is an holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions nor your sins. This is very important what he's saying, because right away we're in the first verses, and it don't sound very fluffy. This guy's not going to forgive your transgressions. Let's go to verse 20. If ye forsake the Lord and serve strange gods, then he will turn and do you hurt, and consume you after that he hath done you good. So he's going to do good for you. He will bless you. And this whole book, you know, there's chapters in where it talks about the blessings for Israel, and really the blessings for all the sons of Adam. If we do right, if we serve our God, he's a jealous God, so if we're loyal to him, he's the only God we know, and we serve him, we listen to his word, and we walk in his ways, he will do us good. But he's telling the nation of Israel, and by proxy the rest of the sons of Adam right here in verse 20, if you forsake the Lord and serve strange gods, then he will turn and do you hurt, and consume you after that he hath done you. So he can do you good a whole long time. That day that you turn, that day when you start serving idols, that day when you start bowing down to a tree in your living room, you know, and making that your God, that day when you make a little fat elf your God, that day when you start doing that, you start serving false gods, he will turn and do you hurt. That's what this is telling us. So now we've seen that Israel's been born, and Joshua's brought the people before the Lord, and the Lord told them something point blank and period. Let's go to Proverbs 9. Let me get there, and I'll start yakking. So, all my life, being raised in the Catholic Church, being in a Sunday Christian church, later serving a Catholic priest, I only heard certain things. I didn't hear a lot of things. I heard about a God, like I started the lesson with, who would accept me no matter how. He's the God of love. When I left my Sunday church, me and the priest whom I served in good faith and loyal for 15 years, we sat down. And he said, look, every time I tried to read him a verse, he'd say, no, don't read, let's talk. But it says right here, no. And then he'd say, look, this is how he explained it. God is love. God is just love, and if you love, then it's okay. And I said, but that's not what the book is saying. The book says something different. Yes, he's love, but first of all, you haven't even defined what love is. Love is something very specific according to the Word of God. You know, I had somebody tell me once, I don't want a God that I have to be afraid of. I don't want a God that you know, all that fire and brimstone stuff. And I said, well, that's interesting. And then I read him this verse. This is Proverbs 9, and this is verse 10. Proverbs 9 and verse 10. We're going to read one verse. And it reads as on this wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. Now, if the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and you don't want to serve a God you have to fear, then you must not be interested in wisdom. Because, you know, we get caught up in what a church tells us, and we get caught up in what a man tells us, but we don't get caught up in what the book tells us. And so that's what this lesson is for, is understanding what the book tells us. So now, another thing they will tell you, and anyone that's been raised in the church will know this, that one of the ways they segregate the Old Testament, and so far we've been in the Old Testament, is they say, well, that was, you know, it changed. What do you mean it changed? Well, that was the God of the Old Testament. Well, who was that? Well, that's God the Father. See, that's what they believe in the Sunday church. That was God the Father. And then Jesus came and he changed it all. And I said, well, that's interesting. But as I learned, I'm not so sure that that's correct. And so we're going to go to Song of Solomon, chapter 1. And we'll start exploring this and find out, because we have to identify if they're right, then maybe they have a point that, you know, if the Father first came and then Jesus came and changed it, okay, well then maybe Jesus and the Father worked it out at some other time. But let's first make sure that what they're saying is correct. And as soon as I find this verse, I'll be able to start doing that. Song of Solomon 1. And we're going to let the Bible interpret the Bible a little bit tonight. This is one of my favorite places to do that at, start at. So this is Song of Solomon 1, and we're going to start at 1. Verse 1 and 2 to start. The Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. 2. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. You know, the first time I read that, I said, well, that's interesting. They really got a love story. Somebody stuck a love story in the middle of the Bible. And so now they're talking about kisses and breasts and all kinds of stuff. Drop down to verse 3. Because of the savor of thy good ointments, thy name is as ointment poured forth. Therefore do the virgins love thee. Now, we don't know who this book's talking about, and we don't know who the virgins are. But I promise you, when you do know who the virgins are, you will know that the virgins do, in fact, love this individual. Drop down to verse 5. It says, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. If you've seen any of my other lessons, you'll know that Israel is a black people. So this individual is saying, I am black but comely, O ye daughters of Jerusalem, as the tents of Kedar, as the curtains of Solomon. 6. Look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but my own vineyards have I not kept. That verse says a wealth of things, and we're going to decipher it. And I'm not going to tell you about it. We're going to let the book tell you about it. So, again, verse 6, look not upon me because I am black, because the sun hath looked upon me. My mother's children were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards, but mine own vineyard have I not kept. So we got to find out who this person is, who is his mother's children, what is the vineyard. So we're going to go from here, we're going to go to Psalm 69. Because there's a lot of meaning in that first chapter of Song of Solomon. A whole lot of meaning. And when I explain it to you, when the book explains it to you, you'll know what we're saying. Because we're identifying the God of the Old Testament. So indulge me. Indulge me. 69, we're going to start at verse 1. 69, Psalm 69, verse 1. Save me, O God, for the waters are coming unto my soul. I sink in deep mire where there is no standing. I am come into deep waters where the floods overflow me. I am weary of my crying, my throat is dried, mine eyes fail while I wait for my God. This is a person in dire straits. This is a person crying out that's experiencing a lot of pain. Verse 4, they that hate me without a cause are more than the hairs of my head. They that would destroy me, being mine enemies wrongfully, are mighty. Then I restored that which I took not away. Well, a couple things. God says, I am God and I change not. Therefore ye sons of Jacob are not consumed. And Paul tells us Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I am here to promise you that this verse 4 is just as accurate today as it ever was. They that hate this person without a cause are more than the hairs of his head. That's true just today. In fact, they still hate him. They hate him in places like these churches that I'm standing in and in the Sunday churches. They hate him out on the corner where people talk about supposedly preaching God. They hate him when you go into government buildings. They won't have his laws on the wall. They won't have him in school. You can't pray anymore. Everywhere you go, they hate this individual. He is hated. And it says without a cause. He says, they that would destroy me, being mine enemies wrongfully, are mighty. This guy has wrongful enemies, and he still has wrongful enemies. And, you know, I love people, the way they think, oh, if this guy had lived today, we would never would have, you would have killed him again. You're killing him constantly. And we're going to talk about how you do that in this lesson. You're still killing him. That was the fourth verse. Let's see, we're going down to verse 6. Let not them, and by the way, this guy sure did restore what something he took not away. Verse 6. Let not them that wait on thee, O Lord God of hosts, be ashamed for my sake. Let not those that seek thee be confounded for my sake, O God of Israel. Man, this is a big time dude to talk like that to the Lord. He's saying, man, not for my sake. Don't let them do that for my sake. And then let's stay on track here. Verse 7. Because for thy sake I have borne reproach. Shame hath covered my face. I am become a stranger unto my brethren and an alien unto my mother's children. There's the mother's children again that we were talking about. Same guy. Same guy. For the zeal of thine house hath eaten me up, and the reproaches of them that reproach thee are fallen upon me. We're about to crack the code on this. We're going to go to Romans 15. We're about to crack the code. I know all you Sunday Christians are like, he went to the New Testament, man. Thank goodness. Now I'll know what he's talking about. Romans 15. So we got mother's children. We got vineyards. We got Romans 15. We're going to read verses 1 through 3. This is St. Paul talking to the converted Gentiles, white people, European white people in Rome. You've heard of Rome, right? You know that there's European white people there? Well, that's what they're called. That's Gentile. See, St. Paul says, I'm the apostle to the Gentiles. And he went to places like Greece and Macedonia and Rome and Turkey. And he walked all, you know, that Europe place. And that's how people like me even heard of this book. Now, by the time it came down to me, my people had totally destroyed every semblance of real gospel and doctrine. But we got the book at least. And the reason we have the book is because this Israelite, this black man from the nation of Israel, walked into I'm Greek. He walked to my forefathers' country and told people about it, even down to Athens. So, where are we at? 15:1 and 3. And this is St. Paul talking to my forefathers. At least my cousins over in Rome. And he says this. He says, when we then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. That statement says a whole lot. Because even today, you heard what I read to start this in 1 Corinthians 13. And he's saying, you know, we that are strong, what he's saying is we that are strong in the word, in the faith, ought to bear the infirmities of the weak. We have to carry those that are new to this word. We have to carry those who are struggling with understanding the word, that are just coming into it, and they're going to deal with a lot of changes. It's going to be a difficult path, and we have to be very long-suffering. We sometimes have to, you know, we have to deal with their rebukes and their arrows and their slings and their cursing till they finally get it. And if we just be patient, sometimes they will. Verse 2, let every one of us please his neighbor, but for his good to edification. So he says, yeah, please your neighbor so that you can inform him. That's what edification means, for his good to edification. 3, for even Christ pleased not himself, but as it is written, the reproaches of them that reproached thee fell on me. So now we know who was talking in Psalm 69. He was a guy whose mother's children were angry with him, who made him an alien, and he was Jesus. So now we got to find out, what is this vineyard that he had? That was Jesus talking to us from the old book. So let's find out, what is this vineyard? We know it's Jesus talking. We're going to go to Isaiah chapter 5. And we're going to close the case on this right now. We know who was speaking though. Paul wrapped it up for us. It was Jesus. So now let's go to Isaiah 5. Hope you guys are enjoying this lesson. Jesus, fluffy or ferocious? We're going to find out which one he is. But right now we're trying to identify the God of the Old Testament. So Isaiah 5, we're going to start at verse 1. Now will I sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard in a very fruitful hill. Well, we've heard two things about this. First of all, we're back to a love story. And the second thing is we're now hearing again about the vineyard. So, Jesus was talking about his vineyard and his well-beloved. Verse 2, and he fenced it, and gathered out the stones thereof, and planted it with the choicest vine, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress therein, and he looked at it, that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes. You know, this book is full of allusions to farming and planting, and you know, when he's talking about, well, let's get to the punchline, then we can come back to that. Verse 3, and now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, betwixt me and my vineyard. Because first he did everything he needed to do. He put a wine press, he got all the stones out of it, he's got good seed, good soil, he's looking for grapes, he's getting wild grapes. And now he's telling Jerusalem and Judah to judge. Verse 4, what could have been done more to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Wherefore, when I looked that it should bring forth grapes, brought it forth wild grapes. And now go to, I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away the hedge thereof, the protection, and it shall be eaten up, and break down the wall thereof, more protection, and it shall be trodden down. Verse 6, and I will lay it waste, it shall not be pruned or digged. See, that's what you have to care for a vineyard. You have to get the weeds out of it. You've got to keep the animals that might eat the fruit. You have to keep a hedge up and a wall up to protect it, and you have to care for it so that weeds won't get to it, and disease and sickness. So let me start that again. Verse 6, and I will lay it waste, it shall not be pruned nor digged, but there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain upon it. Well, we know what a vineyard, if you don't add water to it, what will happen. Verse 7, for the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant. And he looked for judgment, but behold oppression, for righteousness, but behold a cry. So now we know who the God of the Old Testament was. It's Jesus, and the vineyard, it says right here, the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant. So That's his vineyard, but his mother's children were angry with him, and other vineyards he's kept, other vineyards, but not the house of Israel. And the other key thing about this is what Jesus said he would do to his vineyard. See, Israel has been a nation destroyed since Jerusalem fell in 70 AD, which Jesus told his apostles would happen in Matthew 24. He said, you know, that will not be one stone upon another, and people be killed from the sword and taken away captive until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. What is that, John? Brother John, you're talking about the times of the Gentiles. What is that? Well, I'm a Gentile, and it's our time. And if you don't believe me, pull out your money and look at whose face is on it. And everywhere you go, every billboard and every commercial and every law and everything, every banking institute, it's all geared towards, run by Gentiles of some sort. Wherever you go, there we are. Why is that? It's not that we're anything special. It's just at our time. Jesus said it's our time. It used to be Ham's time. It was Shem's time for a while. Now it's the Gentiles. Japheth's time. Our father. So, but he's saying, and so we know that Israel's been in captivity because they're gone. And this book will tell you that they're not going back into the land until Jesus returns and takes them. So who those people are over there, I got nothing against them. But I haven't seen Jesus lately. So I don't know who they are. But all I know is this book tells me that Israel will return when Jesus returns. So they are still in captivity. And we know that because we have another lesson where we talk about things like poverty rate and crime rate and homicide rate. And Israel tops the charts in every single one, at least in the United States, and I'm sure everywhere else, that they've been scattered to, like he told them he would do, like Jesus told them he would do. So, and he's telling us right now. And I'm going to read it again. Verse 5, and now go to, I will tell you what I, not with the white man, not with the Hamites, not with the Arabs, what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away the hedge thereof, and it shall be eaten up, and break down the wall thereof, and it shall be trodden down. And I will lay it waste. It shall not be pruned nor digged, but there shall come up briars and thorns. None of these things are actual farm. Briars and thorns, the worries of the world, the rocks, stones are the things, the hardness of our hearts that inhibit the word from getting in. You know, and the beasts that are going through the vineyard, they're two-legged beasts, and they're consuming the inhabitants of Israel. So this is what Jesus has done to his people. Not very fluffy. We're going to go forward. We're going to go to Deuteronomy 32. He's going to speak a little bit more plainly, but at least we've solved who that was speaking in the Song of Solomon. It was Jesus. And we know who his vineyard is. It's the house of Israel. So we're going to go to Deuteronomy 32. Don't worry, Sunday Christians. We're going to get to the new book, I promise. I promise, man. Hope you guys are feeling great. I feel really great. It's been a really incredible week for me. Learned a lot of stuff. The Lord revealed a lot of stuff. You know what I need? Drink water. And I saw the Lord working in my life this week. So you're not hearing from a person of faith. You're hearing from a person who's got a history of God in his life right now. Deuteronomy 32, we're going to start at verse 21. This is more about Jesus and Israel. Because Jesus is the God of Israel. He's the only God, and we can read you that Israel's only known, that we've ever known. But more on that later. Deuteronomy 32, verse 21. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those who are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. We can break this down real quick. See, there's only one true living God, and that's the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He is the true living God, and then there's God the Father, and they're both in the Godhead. God family, two members right currently. And so that everything else, all these other things that we worship, these trees we put in our house December 25th, these pumpkins on our porches, you know, these eggs and these bunny rabbits in the spring, these are vanities. These are empty. These are not gods. They might be angels that went dark, but they're not gods. And in worshiping them and worshiping trees and the sun, you're worshiping things that are not God. So he's saying, so what happened to Israel? They started following the ways of the people of the land. So Jesus said, destroy them all. Make no allegiances with them. Kill them all, because if you start marrying their daughters, giving your daughters to their sons, they're going to teach you strange gods. And that's exactly what happened. And Israel built the high groves, and they worshipped Baal, and they sacrificed to him, and they were an affront unto God. And God told them over and over. He sent prophet after prophet after prophet to tell them, and some they stoned, and some they killed, and some they ran off, and they would not hear. And so finally he had to put them away from the land. But they made him jealous. The first day they met in the wilderness, he said, I am a jealous God. And so now here in verse 21, he's saying, they've moved me to jealousy with that which is not even. Can you imagine that? You are the only God in the universe, and these people have rejected you for a tree, or for a star, or for a idol that they've crafted. They took a piece of wood and they welded it, and now that is their God. And you created them and everything around them. So of course you would be moved to jealousy, right? And we're just humans. Can you imagine God's wrath, right? You won't have to imagine it. We're going to talk about it tonight. So he said, I'm going to move them to jealousy with the people who are not a people. Yeah, all people. Any people. So he rejected Israel, and then Israel's been in captivity, and the first one to get arrested, the first one to get shot, the first one to get killed or put into prison, or to be denied a loan or an education, and they look around and all these other people are getting all the money and they're getting all the education, and they're not going to jail. And you can have an Israelite and a Gentile, and they go out and they do the exact same thing, and Israelite goes to jail or gets shot, and the Gentile, they say, oh, we understand, you're just a young man, you got to find your way. And they're going, what is that? Well, that's you being moved to jealousy by people who are not even a people, because it could be a Gentile, it could be a Hamite, it could be all manner of people that are not you. Why does it happen to you? Why has it got to be you? Have you ever wondered? Well, I'm telling you why it is. Because the Lord's doing this. Let's proceed. Verse 22. For a fire is kindled in mine anger, and shall burn into the lowest hell, and shall consume the earth with her increase, and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. When I think fluffy, I think set on fire the foundation of the mountain. No, actually I don't think that. I don't think fluffy when a fire is kindled in his anger. Verse 23. I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spend mine arrows upon them. So God has an unlimited supply of arrows, right? Because he's God. But he's going to spend them all shooting at you. 24, they shall be burnt with hunger and devoured with burning heat and with bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them with the poison of serpents of the dust. I don't care what you do, where you go. Israel, he's got something for you. He's either you're getting bit here or bit up here, or getting shot, or an arrow's coming at you, or something's falling from the sky. The sword without and terror within shall destroy both the young man and the virgin, the suckling, also the man of gray hairs. He says, I don't care if it's a little cute little baby or if it's an old man who never bothered nobody. They're all getting it from him. That's how upset our God is. 26, I said I would scatter them into corners. Last week we talked about Israel scattered and forgotten. He's telling you who did it. Jesus did it. I said I would scatter them into corners. I would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. That's why we don't know who they are. That's why you think it's the people over there with the little white flag with the Star of Ephraim on their flag. That's why you think they're Israel. Actually, they don't even say they're Israel. Well, they kind of do. They don't, but they say they were Jews. They don't just 11 other tribes. They don't deal with them. They don't say Israelites. They say Jews, which Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9 talks about. But he said, you're going to be scattered everywhere, and everywhere I go, I see Israelites. Now that I know what to look for. If I go down to Jamaica, Israelites. If I go down to Costa Rica, Israelites. If I go down to South America, Israelites. If I go over to England, if I go to France, if I go to Portugal, wherever I go, you guys are. Because this is what would happen to you. Now I've lost my place. I'm running my mouth too much. So now on to verse 27. Or am I stopping there? No, we're still going. We're loving it. Were it not that I feared the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should behave themselves strangely, and lest they should say, our hand is high, and the Lord hath not done all this. So he wanted to make sure your destruction was so perfect that nobody could say, oh yeah, the white man did that. No. White man can't do what's happening to you guys. We're not that clever, trust me. Your destruction is so perfect. It's so, it's, how many, I'm 50 years old, 52 years old, and I've seen government program after government program, nothing ever works, right? We're going to do this initiative. We're going to march on Washington. We're going to have a special program. It's the war on poverty. It's the great, the great generation. It's this, it's that. It's trillions of dollars. And you still have destroyed people because you upset your God. And let's drop down now to verse 30. How should one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, except their rock has sold them, and the Lord has shut them up? 31. For their rock is not as our rock, even as our enemies themselves being judges. For their vine is the vine of Sodom, and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall, their clusters are bitter. All right, now we're going to go for, so not exactly a fluffy God so far, huh? But we're learning something about Israel. We're learning that Israel made their God jealous. Israel went off against other gods. And then Jesus, the not so fluffy Jesus, got upset with them. And he dealt with them. And so now we're learning what happens when you don't deal with your Lord correctly. So Sunday Christians, I promised we'd get to the new book, and now we're going to do it. We're going to go to 1 Corinthians, chapter 10. Let me get there. I was lost in the Old Testament for a minute. 1 Corinthians 10, because he mentioned something important. He said their rock. He mentioned the rock. So again, we're just going to make sure we know who the rock is. Again, we're going to let the book interpret the book. So this is 1 Corinthians 10, and we're going to go through verses 1 through 4. Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant, how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea. And all were baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. He's talking about when Israel was born, when Israel came out of Egypt. That's exactly what he's talking about. Verse 3, and did all eat the same spiritual meat? Verse 4, and did all drink the same spiritual drink? For they drank of that spiritual rock. The rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. So once again, if you don't know the God of the Old Testament, he's the same God as the New Testament. So, we have to understand why how it is you think that this God of the New Testament is so fluffy when we're reading all about him in the Old Testament. And he's going to tell you things in the New Testament as well. We're going to read in the New Testament, and you're going to see how fluffy this guy is. All right, let's proceed. We're going to go to Daniel 9. Because we want to see what happened to, make sure that we know what happened to Israel. So Daniel's going to tell us for sure. We're going to Daniel 9, and we're going to go to verses 9 through 11. To the Lord our God belong mercies and forgivenesses, though we have rebelled against him. Neither have we obeyed the voice of the Lord our God to walk in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. Yea, all Israel has transgressed thy law, even by departing, that they might not obey thy voice. Therefore the curse is poured upon us, and the oath that is written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, because we have sinned against him. So Jesus is just not arbitrarily punishing Israel. He gave them a set of blessings and curses, specifically in Deuteronomy chapter 28, and they didn't follow it. We've read already how they went after false gods. And so now the curses are poured upon them. And that's the destruction we've been talking about the whole time. And Jesus, when he came in the flesh, so I don't see how these people miss this, right? Because Jesus was a prophet as well, because all prophecy ultimately is of our Lord God Jesus. So let's go to Luke 21, and let's let Jesus do some prophesying. And you would see that he's going to tell us exactly what I already mentioned once. Let me get there. Luke 21. We're going to talk about it. What he's going to really start talking about is when he's going to return. He's really going to start telling us about some future times. And brothers and sisters, if you once upon your life believed in prophecy and believed what your parents told you about God, and then you grew up and you've been going to your Baptist church or your Methodist church and you just don't quite believe it anymore, that's because there's too many unanswered questions in your understanding. But when you come into this faith that we preach here, when you come into this truth, you'll understand that there's no more questions. And once you understand that Israel are real and they're people, and what the book said would happen to them happened to them, and that every single thing the book said, if we went to Daniel 7, we could spend an hour or two talking about the 4 Gentile empires that were to come, which we're still under. And when you see that everything rings true over and over and over, you would understand that what's going to happen after this, according to the book, is what's actually going to happen. And that this isn't a fairy tale. This isn't a fairy tale like a little bunny rabbit and some eggs, like a little fat elf that's dressed in red, and he goes in and out your chimney because he's got magic, and you're bowing down to trees and pumpkins on Halloween. So those are all fantasies. You know, the people that are up in heaven smiling, that's a fantasy because you won't find in this book. But nobody sees. So this is the supernatural. Supernatural is you can't find Christmas, eating pork, Sunday service, going to heaven, Easter in the Bible. Yet everybody believes it. So anybody on earth can pick up this book and you can't find any of that. Yet millions upon billions of people believe these lies. Yet here we are, we tell you the truth, and we're in a cult. Anyway, forgive me. Forgive my editorializing. So we're in Luke 21. When you believe this truth, when you come to believe this truth, you're going to come to believe that what's going to happen next is going to happen. And here I am, a Gentile brother that's telling you the truth. And it's telling you it's time to repent and to hear what thus saith the Lord. The Lord is telling me to tell you, I've been called by the Spirit of the Lord. And which Spirit? The Spirit that's in this book. And it's telling me that I'm supposed to preach the gospel. And what does that mean? People of the gospel, you know, they talk about the Bible and they talk about, you know, Sunday church. And no, the gospel is the coming kingdom of God. And it's getting close, folks. So, and once you understand the prophecy in here, you understand how relevant it is to history, you understand how the time's ticking down. And we're almost at the end. That's why you get Gentiles like me that understand the truth. 100 years ago, you'd never see a guy like me standing here. And I wasn't the first, but more and more as I look around, there's more like me. And that's because it's the end times. It is time for this word to go out. Because this gospel must be preached throughout all the world. And you say, well, I always thought, you know, I'm 50, so 40 years ago when I was learning about it, I was like, what? And I read that the gospel must be preached. Everywhere I go, there's a Bible. You can go to Shanghai, and there's going to be a Bible somewhere. You can go to Siberia. You can go to the tip of Africa. You can go to Antarctica, and somebody's got a Bible. So I guess they weren't preaching the right gospel. Because this gospel that we preach is just now starting to really take fire. And when it goes everywhere, then it's going to be about lights out. So we're going to Luke 21. We're going to start at verse 8. This is Jesus talking. And he's... well, this is, a lot of times they come at you from Matthew 24, and this is basically when his apostles are showing him the temple, right? Because he's from this Nazareth. Nazareth is like, what can I say, anybody in D.C., where would it be? It'd be like the Langley Park or something. It's this backwoods town that's not, you know, nobody comes from. It didn't, in fact, one of the apostles was like, does anything good come from? Somebody said, does anything good come from Nazareth? And, because it was like, it was Nowheresville, right? So here's Jesus in the big city, although he had to go back as all good, you know, Israelites did for the feast. But, I mean, they're like, hey, look at the temple, you're grown now, let's see, you check this out, check this out. And he wasn't too impressed, so yeah, well, it's going to be torn down right quick, right? But then he goes on to start prophesying end times, and that's what we're here. But we're not here about the temple. I'm just giving you some context. But so we're in Luke 21, we're going to start at verse 8. And he said, take heed that ye be not deceived, for many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them. That's another verse I never understood. What does that mean, to him I am Christ? Well, when I came to find out that of the some billion people who are in the Catholic faith and Christian faith, that they're preaching a whole nother Jesus. I didn't understand that they were coming in the name of Christ, but not in the true doctrine of Christ. Let's go to verse 9. But when ye shall hear of wars and commotions, be not terrified, for these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. Brothers and sisters, for the last 20 years, there's just non-stop war, right? And even then, even when America was at peace, somebody was fighting somewhere. So there's been wars my whole life, my half a century that I've been alive. So let's drop down to verse 12. But before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. Well, we're not quite there yet. We're not chopping off our heads yet, but anybody that's in this truth, anyone that's come into this truth, knows that there is a lot of condemnation that comes with it. There's a lot of accusation that comes with it. There's a lot of, when you start telling people to put down the pork chop, when you start telling people that the Sabbath day is on the seventh day and not the first, when you start telling them that their mother's not in heaven, they get a little upset with you. They get real upset. They get upset in a way that you wouldn't even think is logical. And they talk about you, and they talk bad about you, and they put you out of their churches, their Sunday churches, and they tell you you're in a cult. And Jesus says, this is what's going to happen. This is what my walk's about. So that was verse 12. We're going to drop down to verse 15. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. The other thing, I got a good brother of mine. I'm not going to call his name. I'm not going to do him like that. But he's getting baptized tomorrow, and and he's learning this. He's learning about getting a lot of adversaries in this truth, but he's also learning that very quickly he's starting to learn this book, and he's going to soon, after he gets baptized especially, he's going to be talking to people about this word, and they will literally be going, look, I've known you for years. Where did you get all this knowledge all of a sudden? Because once you come into this real truth, and especially after you get baptized, you start whooping people with the word. So where are we at? Verse 15. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. So them Sunday Christians, when they want to argue about it, and look, I have nothing against anyone. Anyone that worships on Sunday, if you're just hearing this, is fine. Let's talk about it. If you have questions, send them to me at johnpappas16@gmail.com. But if you've been preached to, if I've told you the truth and you reject it, well then I'm going to talk about you a little bit. But I tell you what, when we open these books, we can't talk about that much. And even those who really know something, all that means is the battle's going to last longer. But at the end, this book is going to win out, not their doctrine. I mean, it's not, I don't win out, this book wins out. Let's go to where we're at. Verse 16, and this is true now. This part's true. And ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren and kinsfolks and friends, and some of you shall they cause to be put to death. Well, this is true. This was what I was just talking about. When you come into this truth, people don't necessarily understand, and they're not very understanding. And ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake, and they do. Even people that use the same name and teach a false doctrine, they'll hate you for the name and the true doctrine that you preach. But there shall not an hair of your head perish. And you're saying, wait a second, Brother John, you just told me that they're going to be putting you to death and throwing stuff at you and calling you and dogging you out. And now then you say not a hair of your head shall perish. Well, when Jesus talks about perishing, he's talking about the second death, not the first one. So keep that in mind. That's a lesson for another time. Drop down to verse 22. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled. Why is this fluffy dude talking about vengeance? We're in the New Testament now, man. This guy's supposed to be come as you are. He's not talking about vengeance. Let's drop down to verse 24. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword, and shall be led away captive into all nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. This was a verse I was telling you about earlier. He prophesied what would happen. Now I'm about to hit you with some, but we're going to read through this. And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring. So now we're getting into his return in the end times. And we're in Luke 21 right now, and I can take you in Revelation, I can take you all through the prophets, and we can talk about the same day when he gets back and types of things. But, you know, and he talks about the signs that they'll be seeing in heaven and earth. And we'll read some other places. But where I was really getting to, brothers and sisters, starts here. Because we want to see how fluffy Jesus is right now. Men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And then shall they see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. So men's hearts failing them for fear is not fluffy. And we're going to, as this lesson progresses, we're going to see a few things about the Lord. See, we read in Proverbs 9 and 10, the second verse, we read that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom. And people don't know the Lord. You know, my senior pastor at the Israel of God, the church I attend, he's got a lesson called Jesus, the Unknown God. And he says, I don't want to speak for him, but I think the premise is that people proclaim Jesus, you know, day and night. All you hear out of people is Jesus. But they have no idea who Jesus is. And the reason is they don't go and read this book for them to learn what he is, because he'll tell you about himself. Let's go to Amos 3. We're going to start learning about Jesus tonight. We're going to see if he's fluffy or if he's ferocious. Now I got to find him. I think I passed him. in Amos. Here we go. Amos 3, we're going to read verses 6 and 7. This is the Lord speaking. And this is going to be something you didn't think the Lord might say, because you probably in the 2 verses you got last weekend didn't hear this. Verse 6, Amos 3 and 6. Shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? Shall there be evil in a city, and the Lord hath not done it? Did you hear what I said? I'm going to do it again. All right? Sunday Christians, listen up. Shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? See, in Israel, when there was, and even in olden times, when there was trouble coming, they would blow a trumpet. You hear the trumpets, you're like, oh man, there's an army, or a flood, or dragons, or something's coming. So he's saying, shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not afraid? But then he says something key. Shall there be evil in the city, and the Lord hath not done it? Brother John, you mean the Lord does evil? That's what the book said, right? I didn't say it. The book just said it. Let's go to, we're going to do verse 7. Surely the Lord God will do nothing, but he revealeth his secret unto his servants the prophets. So we're going to read from some of these prophets tonight. We're reading from some of the prophets tonight. But the point of that is everything he does has been prophesied. So we can look to what's going to happen because his prophets have told us about it. And so now we know that the Lord's capable of doing evil because he told us. You probably didn't think fluffy Jesus could do that, right? You thought he was good. He was nothing but love. But here it's saying, shall there be evil? And he hasn't done it. So now we're going to continue. I'm going to tell you another story that you probably wouldn't think the Lord would do. Not your fluffy Lord. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 22. This is about King Ahab. He wasn't a very good king. He wasn't very righteous. And so we'll see what happened to old King Ahab. We're going to 1 Kings 22. And we're going to start at verse 2. And this is a good story. It's one of my favorite stories because this story kind of opened my eyes a little bit about, wow, the Lord God did that, huh? This was, there's a lot of different meanings in this. So verse 2. And it came to pass in the 3rd year that Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, came down to the king of Israel. So now, you know, Solomon sinned. They had 3 kings. They had King Saul, King David, then King Solomon. He ended up in some ways being the greatest king of Israel because under his reign, the borders were the widest, the wealth was the greatest, the guy was rich, Israel was rich, he built the first temple. The temple of Solomon had such splendor and wealth. I know Brother Andrew from IOG does a lesson and talks about in today's dollars, it's unbelievable amounts, like billions and billions, if not trillions of dollars worth of gold and silver and different gems went into that temple, and the splendor was unheard of Solomon's temple. So Israel really was at its heyday, was at its pinnacle under Solomon. But then he sinned. And the Lord said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to split the kingdom. It's no longer going to be a unified kingdom. I'm actually going to make it two kingdoms. It'll be Israel in the north, Judah in the south. And so, even though they were all Israelites, you had basically, well, first you had 10 tribes in the north and 2 tribes in the south. You had Benjamin and Judah in the south. You had everybody else up north. But then one of the kings of the north, they turned evil quickly, and that's why they went into captivity and were lost to history quicker than Judah did. And the Levites, who were the priest tribe, said, we're not dealing with this, we're going back south. So basically a lot of the Levites went down to Judah, so it ended up 9 tribes really went into captivity. And although some remained with them, because we know that because the Assyrians sent back a Levite to teach the Gentiles they put in Israel and Samaria. But most of them went down south, but that's so when we have a king of Judah and a king of Israel, that's why it's because we have a divided nation. So let me read again, verse 2. And it came to pass in the 3rd year that Jehoshaphat, he was the king of Judah, the king of Judah came down to the king of Israel. And the king of Israel said unto his servants, know ye that Ramoth and Gilead is ours, and we be still, and take it not out of the hand of the king of Syria. So, you know, Israel was around for a long time, centuries, and they had wars. They constantly warred with a lot of the nations that surround, the Syrians being one. And what the king of Israel right now is talking about this area of land called Ramoth and Gilead. He said, it's ours, but the Syrians, they still got it. And he said unto Jehoshaphat, wilt thou go with me to battle in Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat said to the king of Israel, I am as thou art, and my people as thy people. There are Israelites, my horses as thy horses. So he's saying, hey, we're brothers, we're the same nationality, you know, we're all God's children, his chosen. I'm with you, man. You want to go to war? I got you. And in verse 5, and Jehoshaphat, but see, Jehoshaphat was actually a righteous king, and we're going to find out through here he wasn't the brightest king, but he was quite righteous. So he said, and Jehoshaphat said unto the king of Israel, inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. Because he went to hear, let's call upon the prophets, let's call upon the priests, and let them ask of the Lord and see what he says. Shall we go to battle? Because they knew that they needed to inquire of the Lord, because only with his blessing could they be victorious. 6, then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 men, and said unto them, shall I go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or should I forbear? And they said, go up, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. Now, why the king of Israel had to bring out 400 prophets, right? He couldn't just get 1 or 2. He had to bring out 400, and they all said the same thing. That alone should have raised some eyebrows, and perhaps it did, because Jehoshaphat asked him one more thing. So he's just heard from 400 prophets, right? But yet he said, verse 7, and Jehoshaphat said, is there not here a prophet of the Lord besides, that we might inquire of him? I don't know what he saw in those 400, but if you honestly, you bring 400 people to tell me something, I'll be like, okay. In fact, like around 39, I'll be like, I got you. You're going to tell me. You're going to tell me the same thing, right? That he told me, and then, you know, and then if I even did that to like 67, I'd be, all right, I believe all of you. So 400 people, he said, no, I want to see more. Is there not here a prophet of the Lord besides, that we might inquire? And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, there is yet one man, Micaiah, the son of Imlah, by whom we may inquire of the Lord, but I hate him, for he doth not prophesy good concerning me, but evil. Jehoshaphat said, let not the king say so. I love this story. Verse 9, then the king of Israel called an officer and said, hasten hither Micaiah the son of Imlah. And the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat the king, I think I'm supposed to drop down because we don't like that verse, we don't care about that. Yeah, let's go on to verse 12. Forgive me. We don't need the extras. Let's get to the business. Verse 12, and all the prophets prophesied so, saying, so now they've gone to get this other Micaiah dude, right? And now the other 400 guys, they're feeling it now, right? So while they're gone and they're waiting, all the prophets prophesied so, saying, yeah, go up to Ramoth Gilead and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the king's hand. And the messenger that was gone to call Micaiah spake unto him. So he's got Micaiah. And now remember, he never says good stuff about the king. And so the guard, the dude that went to get him, is trying to get him ready. He's like, look, man, So he says, so the messenger that was gone to call Micaiah spake unto them, saying, Behold now, the words of the prophets declare good unto the king with one mouth. Let thy word, I pray thee, be like the word of one of them, and speak that which is good. So he's saying, look, man, they all told the king, this is good to be. Look, today, this one day, we got the king of Judah here. Just go up there and say what they said, man. You know, come back home. So what did Micaiah say? He said, Micaiah said, As the Lord liveth, what the Lord saith unto me, that will I speak. So this is a true prophet of God. He said, hey, I don't care what the people said. Whatever the Lord tells me is what I'm going to say. Let's go down to, yeah, okay, we're right there. So 15. So he came to the king, and the king said unto him, Micaiah, shall we go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we forbear? And he answered him, Go and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. Now, I'm going to read a couple more verses, then we're going to come back to that, right? Because the messenger told him, look, man, they're all saying the same thing. You say it too. And he said, hey, I'm only going to say what the Lord God said. So then he came and he said it too, right? I'll do it again. And he said, so he came to the king, and the king said unto him, Micaiah, shall we go against Ramoth Gilead to battle, or shall we forbear? And he answered him, Go and prosper, for the Lord shall deliver it into the hand of the king. And the king said unto him, How many times shall I adjure thee, that thou tell me nothing but that which is true in the name of the Lord? Verse 17. And he said, I saw all Israel. This is now Micaiah said, oh, okay, it's like that? Well, let me tell you this then. And he said, I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills, as sheep that have not a shepherd. And the Lord said, See, these have no master. Let them return every man to his house in peace. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, Did I not tell thee that he would prophesy no good concerning me, but evil? Now, brothers and sisters, this struck me, right? Why would he on the first hand, the messenger says, look, man, they're all saying the same thing. You say the same thing, let's call it a rap, okay? And he said, look, I'm going to do what the Lord tells me to do. Whatever the Lord says, that's what I'm going to say. But then he gets there, and what does he do? He says the exact same thing the 400 prophets say. But then the king of Israel, Ahab, he says something very particular. And he says, verse 16, I'm going to read this again, because it's setting up something. The king said unto him, this is learning something on the way to learning something. And the king said unto him, How many times shall I adjure thee, that thou tell me nothing but that which is true in the name of the Lord? All right, we're going to go somewhere else to learn something. We're going to go to Matthew 26. And then we'll be right back. This is very simple. This is something I learned. I learned this on my own, but kind of left out of me. And it's nothing, like, whoa, unbelievable, but it's something interesting to know. Matthew 26. This is when Jesus is brought, this is when he's being condemned, basically. And they bring him before the high priest, and all these people start lying on him. And this is how he reacts, right? We're going to see a same change of behavior. We're going to see first one behavior. First Micaiah said, yeah, go on up, man. Enjoy yourself. Go ahead. And then he saw another behavior after the guy said, I adjure thee. So we're going to see the same thing here. This is Matthew 26. We're going to go to verse 59. We're going to read through to 65. Now the chief priests and the elders and all the council sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. And at last came two false witnesses. The last two couldn't find anybody. Then these two dudes, verse 61, and said, This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said unto him, Answerest thou nothing? What is this in which these witnesses testify? What is it which these witness against thee? This is what I wanted to point out, verse 63. But Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered, so now, these people have all been yelling at him. They've been saying lies about him. And so they, even after that, when his very life is on the line, the high priest says, well, what is this? And Jesus stands there and he doesn't even speak to him. He says nothing to defend himself. But then the priest says something very, very important. So let me get back to verse 63. But Jesus held his peace, and the high priest answered and said unto them, I adjure thee by the living God, that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God. 64. Jesus saith unto him, Thou hast said, Nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter ye shall see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven. When you demand a spirit creature when you adjure them in the name of the living God to tell you the truth, they have no choice but to do that. So Micaiah the prophet, he said, yeah, go on up there, just like your prophet said. Go on up there. Yeah, you're going to do great, man. Go ahead. But then the king said, but I adjure thee. Same thing here with the high priest. He said, what are you saying? Jesus said nothing. He said, I adjure thee in the name of the living God to tell me. And Jesus says, yeah, that's right. Just like you said it. And that was what got him condemned. Now let's go back to Micaiah. We left off at 1 Kings 22 and 16, I believe. No, later than that, 18 or 19. So let's pick it up again. So, yeah, that's right. So he said that. And so let's go start at 17. And he said, I saw all Israel scattered upon the hills as sheep that have not a shepherd. And the Lord said, these have no master. Let them return every man to his house. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, did I not tell thee that he would prophesy no good concerning me but evil? And he said, now that Micaiah has been called out in the name of the living God, now he's feeling it. Now he's enjoying himself. So he's going to have his say now. Verse 19. And he said, hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne. This is where I really wanted to get with this story. Listen to what Micaiah says, that the Lord does. And he said, hear thou therefore the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven standing by him on his right hand and on his left. And the Lord said, who shall persuade Ahab that he may go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? And one said on this manner, and another said on that manner. 21. And there came forth a spirit, and stood before the Lord, and said, I will persuade him. And the Lord said unto him, wherewith? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a lying spirit in the mouth of his prophets. And he said, thou shalt persuade him, and prevail also. Go forth, and do so. Now therefore, behold, the Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets. Remember, this guy is standing in front of 400 people. He's like, all these dudes right here are lying. Therefore, behold, the Lord hath put a lying spirit in the mouth of all these prophets, and the Lord hath spoken evil concerning thee. But Zedekiah the son of Chenaanah went near and smote Micaiah. Look, Micaiah was talking trash about 400 of these dudes. He went up and hit him in his jaw on the cheek and said, which way went the Spirit of the Lord from me to speak unto thee? And Micaiah said, behold, thou shalt see in that day when thou shalt go into an inner chamber to hide thyself. So, and the king of Israel said, take Micaiah and carry him back to Amon the governor of the city, and to Joash the king's son, and say, thus saith the king, put this fellow into prison, and feed him with the bread of affliction and with water of affliction until I come in peace. So he said, go lock him up until I get there. Well, he wasn't going to get there. Micaiah said, if thou return at all in peace, the Lord hath not spoken by me. And he said, hearken, O people, every one of you. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat, the king of Judah, went up into Ramoth Gilead. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, this is the part where Jehoshaphat wasn't exactly too bright. And the king of Israel said unto Jehoshaphat, I will disguise myself and enter into the battle, but put thou on thy robes. And the king of Israel disguised himself. And why would Jehoshaphat dress as, oh, okay, you be just a soldier and I'll be the king. Yeah, he was a righteous king, but I'm not sure how bright he was. So long and short of it, brother and sister, he goes and gets killed. But the point of the story was, look at what the Lord did. The Lord called for a plan to kill this. The Lord was sick of this king of Israel, Ahab. And he said, who's going to convince him to go up so that he can be slain in this battle? And this creature stepped forth, and then this one spirit, and I wonder what the name of this one spirit was, said, oh, I'll be a lying spirit and all. So, what strikes me about this lesson is that it's a spirit. He put a lying spirit. So these people, you got to be careful which spirits. Oh yeah, I felt the spirit. Really? Which spirit did you feel? I felt the spirit that came from the Lord. Really? Because right here we saw a lion spirit was sent from the Lord to kill a man. So, again, was that fluffy or ferocious? These things we learn, once we start reading this book, we start learning that maybe we come to have a new understanding about our God. And what he wants most of all is obedience, not sacrifice. He wants obedience. And then he wants other things like mercy and judgment, charity. He wants the fruits of the Spirit. But if we're not going to be that, if we're going to abuse the poor, if we're going to take advantage of people, if we're going to hate our brother, well, then he can bring evil upon us. And then he can be a not so friendly, not so fluffy Jesus, as it were. And we're going to read about this now, because this entire planet is nothing but evil now. It's almost like the days of Noah. And it was prophesied to become this. You know, we're framing mischief with a law. You know, we've got Sodom and Gomorrah's back. Remember what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah and why it happened. And if you don't know that story, if you just happen to be a Friday night and you're bored on the internet and you found this crazy white dude that's telling you Bible verses like you've not heard before, and you're not familiar with the Bible and you're just kind of curious, go read about Sodom and Gomorrah. They were sodomites. They were homosexuals, and he destroyed it with fire. And the prophecy says that the world will again become like that, and that he's going to come again and deal with it. Nothing, you know, he drowned the entire world. This fluffy Jesus drowned the entire planet. He left 8 people alive. And so when we don't obey him, you know, but those who do, we understand, we fear this Lord. That's why the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom and the beginning of knowledge. So now we're going to start getting into the day of the Lord. We touched on it a little bit in Luke. Now we're going to see what it looks like. Jesus is coming back. His words being prophesied by people like me, to people like you, and it's spreading throughout the world, and time's ticking down, and soon he's coming again. And let's tell you what that day is going to be like. So, you know, the Sunday churches tell you there's going to be this rapture and this. Boy, this is a good fairy tale. I was talking to a brother of mine, another brother in the truth tonight, before the lesson, and I was saying, my people, we came up with all these fairy tales, man. You know, what do you get from Gentiles? You get elves and hobbits and you know, wizards and he said, yeah, false gods. And it struck me, and I said, you know, you're absolutely right. Those fairy tale creatures, those magic creatures, when you go to Disney, they're probably the leftovers of false gods throughout the millennia of my people. And that's what you get from us. So so we created this other fairy tale called the rapture. And the rapture is this thing where, so there's going to be a tribulation like the book says, although they messed that up. And it's going to be real bad. But right before it happens, fluffy Jesus is going to snap his fingers or something, and all the good people are going to disappear. So like if you're driving a car, and also your clothes will be on the seat and the car is going to roll down the street empty, right? If you're flying in a plane, pilot, poof, he's going to disappear. And they're all going to go up to heaven where Mama already is smiling, and they're going to, you know, hang out and chill out and stuff, and then the world's going to be in trouble. Well, that's not what the book says, and we're going to find out what the book says. So let's do that now. We're going to go to Zechariah 1. Zechariah 1. Let me get there. Should have been flipping. Now we're going to see what it's going to be like. And we're going to tell you, if you understood this book, even the little bit I do, then you understand that I know for a fact that this book has told us things centuries before they came to pass. Again, I referenced Daniel already, and you know, Daniel, he wrote about the Medes and the Persians before they took over. He wrote about the Greeks before they came. He wrote about Rome before it happened. If I could find this, here I go. You know, Jesus was prophesied hundreds of times in the Old Testament. We've read some of it tonight. Some of that Song of Solomon, some of that Isaiah, Deuteronomy, the stuff about Israel going into captivity, all that stuff's historically accurate. You had the transatlantic slave trade. Before that, you had the Arab slave trade, forgive me, that was on the eastern side of Africa, in the north and up north. You know, Israel's been scattered just like the book said. So what does that mean? That means the day of the Lord is coming, just like the book says. That means He really wants us to keep his commandments, just like the book says. You see, nowhere can you find where the law was done away with. So, my Gentile brothers and sisters, see, we're ignorant. We were taught by Paul, but for some reason, those Gentiles dropped the ball. My forefather, Timothy, the Timothy of this Bible is my forefather. He was a Greek. He was a good brother in this truth, but for some reason, from him to me, it got lost in translation. So, this book is, this thing is telling us something real. We just lost. We had no understanding. So as a result, we didn't know that there's more than one kind of law. So when St. Paul says the law is no more, we're like, oh, we're going to eat pork then. Give me the shrimp. But no, there's actually 4 types of law. There's the royal law, which was the law that God himself came down to Mount Horeb and spoke, the 10 Commandments. There is the dietary law that, Leviticus 11. There is the ceremonial law. Those are the things they did in the temple, which there's no temple, so that's laws until the temple returns. And then there was the law of sacrifice. That was to atone for your sins, right? So you go out and you mess up and you commit adultery. You say, okay, well, I'm going to take my goat over there. I like the goat. He's my favorite goat. But now I'm going to take him up to the temple and we're going to cut him up and cook him up to the Lord, and I'm good. My sin's been cleansed. Well, that was only a stopgap. My favorite goat's not the one that, snuck down the street and in the back door to somebody's house. So his blood could not atone for my sin. But still, the wages of sin are death. So when something sins, something has to die. So the law was met, but still we weren't made clean. You see, our life could be saved, our physical life, but it couldn't clean us. And that's what Jesus did for us. But that's another lesson for another time. Here we are in Zechariah 1, and we're going to go to verse 15. And the reason I want to point this out is because even though the Lord was whooping up on Israel, my people made it look worse. And this is why when the Lord gets back, forgive my vernacular, he's going to be very pissed off. Because though he had some stuff in store for Israel, my people got a little buck wild with it, right? We went a little overboard. And this is him saying as much. This is Zechariah 1 and 15. And I am very sore displeased with the heathen, that means the nations, that are at ease. For I was but a little displeased, and they helped forward the affliction. So while Israel was in all kinds of hot water, the other nations who were taking advantage of their free slave labor, who were sleeping with their wives, who were murdering them and lynching them and whooping them, they were chilling, man. They had Sunday dinner ready. They had people going to college, and life was good for them. So they were at ease, and we're still at ease. And it's still rough for the Israelites. So he's saying, I'm very sore displeased with the heathen that are at ease. For I was but a little displeased with Israel, and they helped forward the affliction. So when he gets back, that's why he's not going to be happy. So let's look at when he gets back. Let's go to Revelation 6. Now we're getting to the good part. We're winding down, but I wanted to make the end spicy. Revelation 6. We're going to start at verse 9. So, once again, we have fluffy Jesus. Excuse me, we're going to start at verse 12. We have fluffy Jesus who takes all comers. Come as you are. He's Jesus love, 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 love. So let's see what it's like the day he gets back, this fluffy guy. Verse 12, and I beheld when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black in sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. So we can read throughout the Bible, this is one of the signs, and I mentioned this in Luke 21, that there's signs in heaven. And basically, the earth will quake, and the sun goes out, it becomes black, and the moon becomes red as blood. These are the signs of the end times, when Jesus returns. And verse 13, and the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. So stars are literally going to fall to the heavens, it's telling us. So there's all kinds of commotion. Sun's turning black, moon's turning red, and stars are falling from the heaven. Verse 14, this is the sign here. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. So this is the sky is peeling. Literally, we're going to look up, the sky is going to peel back. Great tumult and earthquakes are going on around us, right? Now, all your life, you've been waiting for Jesus to come back, and you've been singing about your Jesus over your ham dinner, and you can't wait till he comes for philosophy Jesus comes back. Well, if that's the case, why is this happening when he appears? Verse 15. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. Now, why would they do that when Jesus is back? Well, this is why in verse 16. And they said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? People are literally going to want the mountains to fall on top of them. They would rather be crushed than to deal with the guy that's coming. That's why we say the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of knowledge. Let's go to Psalm 110. We'll read some more about it. It's just getting good to us now. And I don't take glee in reading this, but you know what? Someone's not going to take glee in me if I had this truth and I didn't share it with you, when I could have helped you make a difference and change yourself before this. Because if you don't change by this day, this book here says, if you're evil then, let him remain evil. Be evil still. However you are in this day, stay that way. Because it's going to, all accounts will be settled. We're going to Psalm 110. We're going to read the whole thing. That's how much I enjoy it. Psalm 110. The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. See, there's not a triune God. Let me just be point blank and period. God is a multi-person God. Yes, God means both. It's like man. It means both singular and plural. Uni-plural, right? One, many. So yes, God's the same way. There's a man family and a God family. And currently there's only two people in it. I defy you to find in this book where it tells you anything different. There's God the Father and God the Son. So when my Lord said to, when the Lord said to my Lord, that's completely consistent with the other parts of the Bible we can read about. There's God the Father telling God the Son, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. The Lord shall send the rod of thy strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. Let me tell you something. Jesus is coming back to do one thing. He's going to sit on David, his fathers, in the flesh, on his throne in Jerusalem, and he's going to rule this planet with a rod of iron. So, trust me, it's not going to be like it is today. Verse 3. Thy people shall be willing in the day of thy power, and the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning. Thou hast the dew of thy youth. The Lord hath sworn and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Jesus is the priest king. He's coming back as the priest king. King of Israel and the high priest of the living God. The Lord at thy right hand shall strike through kings in the day of his wrath. Now we're in the day of his wrath again. He shall judge among the heathen, the nations. He shall fill the places with the dead bodies. He shall wound the heads over many countries. He shall drink in the brook in the way, therefore shall he lift up the head. This guy's coming back, like I said, he's upset, and he's going to be taking people out, so much so that he's going to fill the places with the dead bodies. Have you ever heard this preached in your Sunday church? Is this what you guys talk about ever? I mean, ever. But this is all through this book. You don't believe me? Let's go to Revelation 14. Here a little, there a little. We're just bouncing around. It's funny how the same thing, that's how I know this book is real. Wherever I go, it keeps telling me the same thing. The Bible's really, there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's a lot of the same stuff. This message he keeps telling you. He wants so much for us to hear and to repent and to keep his ways that he keeps telling us the same stuff throughout the generations and every generation over and over until he filled up this whole book. And then even though he destroyed Israel, he left a remnant that would have understanding so they could, hey, You know, there was a time where Israel couldn't even read, man. That was the death sentence to read. Why? Because they were carrying this law. And if they knew it, they could keep it. And they somehow got it through. You know, a lot of people probably died trying to get this message to you today through this book. Because the real truth of this Bible had to be brought by Israel, or we wouldn't know it. So now we're in Revelation 14. We're going to start at verse 17. We're at the day of the Lord now. And another angel came out of the temple which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out from the altar, which had power over fire, and cried with a loud voice to him that had the sharp sickle, saying, Thrust in thy sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. 19. And the angel thrust his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of God. Verse 20. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse's bridle, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. I once converted this, I'm probably wrong, it's something like 250 miles. The blood will be up to the horse's bridle for 250 miles. There will be so much blood. There'll be so much blood from the killing when Jesus gets back that even we can't even bury him all. He's going to call beasts down and the fowls of the air just to come eat the bodies. There'll be so many bodies that will not be able to be buried. And there's going to be so many people dead, there won't be enough people, enough men left to bury so many dead. And I can read that to you. Let's go to Joel 3. We're getting close. We're coming almost down to the end. Joel 3. We're reading, what have we read? About 3-4 verses in a row. We're talking about the day of the Lord. And it's all death and destruction. It's blood up to the horse's bridles. It's body stacked, leaving body stack. It's, you know, going through kings, begging the stuff to fall on them. Why am I not finding this now when I need it? No. Forgive me. I'm not in Joel too much, and I always mix up where it's at. I knew there'd come a time I couldn't find something. Probably passed it 4 times already. I know I'm right around it. Nope. So I know there's some people on the internet screaming, right there, man! Right after something. Somebody can help me. Teacher, the Gentile dropped the book, man. Here it is. It was hiding. I know where it was at. It was between Amos and Hosea. Tell me. Joel 3, in verse 9. So, like I said, he's a little upset with my people. Unless we repent, we can repent, and we can come just like Israel. In fact, I am spiritual Israel, so I don't have to fear this day. But if you haven't repented, you might have to. So, this is what's going to happen. And we're already seeing this. Verse 9, Joel 3 and 9. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war. Let me tell you something. Every Gentile nation now is preparing for war, aren't they? England and us, and everyone's saber rattling. North Korea's acting